I used to think the American dream was a house. Not a mansion, not some ridiculous marble staircase situation with a fountain in the driveway. Just a house. A little front porch. A garage. A backyard where somebody's dad is fighting for his life over a grill. Maybe a dog. Maybe two kids. Maybe a washer and dryer that you own, which, when you become an adult, suddenly feels like luxury beyond imagination. And growing up in America, that dream was everywhere. It was in movies. It was in commercials. It was in the way adults talked about success. Go to school, get a good job, buy a house, start a family, build a life. Simple. But then I grew up. I moved to Germany. I started looking at American life from the outside, and I realized something that made me really sad. The American dream did not disappear. It got financed. That little house became a 30-year mortgage. The good job became employer-sponsored health insurance that you're terrified to lose. The college degree became student loans. The family car became an auto loan. The emergency became a credit card balance. The baby became unpaid leave and childcare payments. The normal middle-class life became a stack of monthly bills wearing a cute sweater and calling itself freedom. And the wildest part is, Americans are not walking around saying, "This is historically strange." A lot of us are saying, "Yeah, that's just how life works." But it is not just how life works. It is how American life was redesigned. Because the original American dream, at least the version sold after World War II, was not just about individual hustle. It was built on massive public investment. The GI Bill, signed in 1944, helped veterans with college education, unemployment insurance, and housing. And the National Archives says it put higher education within reach of millions of veterans. The Federal Housing Administration, created in 1934, helped expand mortgage insurance and says it has insured more than 50 million mortgages since then. The 1956 Interstate Highway Act expanded the interstate system to 41,000 miles and authorized $25 billion for construction from 1957 through 1969. So when people talk about the good old days, like everybody just worked harder back then, I always want to pause the conversation. Because yes, people worked hard, but the country was also building ladders, not for everyone equally, and that part matters. Black Americans, women, immigrants, and many other groups were excluded, blocked, redlined, underpaid, and denied access in ways that shaped wealth for generations. But for millions of white middle-class families especially, the dream had support beams underneath it. Affordable public colleges, union jobs, pensions, cheaper homes compared with income, expanding suburbs, government-backed mortgages, public investment everywhere. And then, slowly, America did something very American. It kept the dream, but privatized the cost. The dream stayed in the commercial. The bill moved to the household. That is how you get to the country we have now, where the New York Fed says total U.S. household debt reached $18.8 trillion at the end of 2025. Mortgage balances were $13.17 trillion. Credit card balances hit $1.28 trillion. Auto loans were about $1.67 trillion. Student loans were about $1.66 trillion. $18.8 trillion. That number is so big it almost becomes meaningless. So let me make it emotional. That number is not just the economy. That is the couple who bought groceries on a credit card because payday was still 4 days away. That is the nurse paying student loans for a degree she needed to get the job that barely lets her breathe. That is the dad driving a car he cannot really afford because without it, he cannot get to work. That is the family in a house they love, quietly praying the furnace does not break. That is not a spreadsheet. That is a country where ordinary life has become leveraged. And I know someone is going to say, well, debt is not always bad. True, a mortgage can build wealth. Student loans can raise earning potential. A car loan can help someone get to work. Credit can smooth out emergencies. I am not pretending all debt is evil, but there is a huge difference between debt as a tool and debt as a survival system. And in America, more and more, debt is not helping people climb. It is keeping them from falling. Let's start with the house, because the house is the emotional center of the American dream. For generations, homeownership was treated like proof that you made it. Not just financially, but morally. You were stable, responsible, grown. But today, the house has become less like a milestone and more like a gated community around adulthood. The Census Bureau reported that in 2023, more than 21 million renter households spent over 30% of their income on housing costs. That was nearly half of all renter households where rent burden could be calculated. Think about that. Before food, before transportation, before student loans, before childcare, before medical bills, before anything fun like having a personality. The rent is already eating the paycheck, and Americans are told to solve this individually. Get a roommate, move farther out, increase your income, cut subscriptions, stop buying coffee, as if the reason a generation cannot afford houses is because of ICE law lattes, and not because housing costs have detached from wages in city after city. I live in Germany now, and housing is absolutely not perfect here. Rents are stressful, buying can be hard, bureaucracy will humble you. I am not sitting here pretending Europe is a fairy tale, with universal balconies and emotional support bakeries. But the American relationship with housing is different, because the house is not just shelter. It is retirement, it is status, it is school access, it is safety, it is your investment portfolio, it is your proof that all the sacrifices were worth it. So when the house becomes unreachable, it does not just feel expensive. It feels like you failed at being American. And that is how debt becomes psychological. Because if the dream says buy a home, but wages and prices do not line up, people stretch. They take on bigger mortgages. They move farther away and take on longer commutes. They buy whatever they can before it gets even worse. They treat panic as a financial strategy. And then we act shocked that people are exhausted. But before most Americans even reach the house, they meet the first major debt gate: college. When I was growing up, college was sold like oxygen. You need it. You have to do it. No degree, no future. Guidance counselors, parents, commercials, politicians, everybody repeated the same message. Education is the way out. But for millions of Americans, education became the way into debt. Federal Student Aid reported in March 2026 that the outstanding federal student loan portfolio included 42.8 million recipients and totaled $1.7 trillion. The Federal Reserve found that among people with education debt for their own schooling in 2024, the median amount owed was between $20,000 and $24,999. And yes, plenty of people borrow more, much more. This is the part that people outside America find so strange. We ask teenagers to make one of the biggest financial decisions of their lives before they have ever had a full-time adult paycheck. A 17-year-old cannot rent a car in most places. But we will let that same kid sign paperwork that can follow them for decades because everyone around them says, "Don't worry, it's good debt, good debt." That phrase needs therapy. Because debt does not feel good when you are 27 and your payment is due before your career has even stabilized. It does not feel good when you want to move, marry, have a child, start a business, or take a job that pays less but means more. And the cruelest part is that the degree was not frivolous. A lot of people did exactly what they were told. They did not buy a yacht, they bought access. And then the access came with interest. Now let's talk about credit cards, because this is where the dream gets very quiet and very everyday. Credit card debt does not always start with luxury. Sometimes it starts with groceries, gas, a dental bill, a car repair, a birthday gift for your kid because you do not want them to know how tight things are. The Federal Reserve found that in 2024, 63% of adults said they would cover a $400 emergency expense with cash or the equivalent, which means a huge share of adults would need another method, like borrowing, selling something, or carrying a balance. That is the part people miss. America is full of people who look fine from the outside, but one flat tire away from financial chaos. And the credit card companies know this. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau reported that average APRs on credit cards assessed interest almost doubled over 10 years, from 12.9% in late 2013 to 22.8% in 2023, the highest level recorded since the Federal Reserve began collecting that data in 1994. 22.8%. At that point, your credit card is not a convenience. It is a treadmill with a rewards program. And Americans have become extremely good at making debt sound normal. We say, "I'm just carrying a balance right now." Carrying a balance sounds so gentle, like you're holding a sleepy baby. No, you are being hunted by compound interest. But again, it is not because people are stupid. This is what happens when the cost of basics rises faster than the feeling of security. And then there is the car. America tells itself cars equal freedom, and sometimes they do. I will never deny the emotional power of a long American road trip. The gas station coffee, the giant sky, the questionable hot dog rotating under fluorescent lights since the Clinton administration. Beautiful, terrifying, iconic. But needing a car to exist is not freedom. It is another bill. Auto loan balances reached about $1.67 trillion at the end of 2025, according to the New York Fed. And that does not include gas, insurance, repairs, parking, registration, tires, tolls, and the emotional damage of a check engine light. In Germany, I can take a train to another city and complain about it being late. And yes, Deutsche Bahn deserves some of the complaints. But the fact that I can complain about a train means the train exists. In many American suburbs, if your car dies, your life collapses. You cannot get to work, you cannot get groceries, you cannot take your kid to school, you cannot go to the doctor, you cannot participate in society unless you keep feeding the machine. So people finance cars because they need them. Then they need more income to pay for the car. Then they drive farther to afford housing. Then the farther housing makes the car even more necessary. That is not a lifestyle. That is a trap with cup holders. And then there is medical debt, which is probably the clearest example of how America turned bad luck into a billing event. In many countries, getting sick is scary because you are sick. In America, getting sick is scary because you are sick and because 6 different envelopes may arrive 3 weeks later, each written in a language only insurance goblins understand. Even with insurance, Americans can face deductibles, copays, out-of-network charges, denied claims, and bills that make you want to lie down. Except lying down is how this whole problem started. And medical debt is especially cruel because it is not aspirational debt. Nobody is saying, I really manifested this emergency appendectomy. You did not choose it as part of your 5-year plan. Your body just did something rude. And suddenly, your credit, your savings, your ability to rent, your ability to breathe financially, all of it can be affected by the fact that you had the audacity to be made of organs. This is why I get frustrated when people reduce American debt to bad personal choices. Yes, personal choices matter. Of course they do. But the story is bigger than somebody buying too many shoes. The story is that America put more and more of life's basic risks onto individuals, then built industries to lend people money when those risks arrived. Healthcare is expensive? Put it on a payment plan. College is expensive? Borrow. Housing is expensive? Stretch. Car required? Finance it. Childcare expensive? Use savings if you have any. Emergency? Credit card. Groceries too high this month? Buy now, pay later. Even that phrase is so American it should come with an eagle sound effect. Buy now, pay later. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau says the buy now, pay later market continued to expand between 2019 and 2023, typically through 4-payment retail loans with no interest. And I understand why people use it. I really do. 4 smaller payments feel easier than 1 big payment. It can help with cash flow. It can be useful. But culturally, look at what it means. We are now financing pants, not houses, not businesses, pants. At some point, the American dream went from own a home to split this hoodie into 4 interest-free payments. And I'm not saying that to shame anyone. I'm saying it because it is heartbreaking. People are not using these tools in a vacuum. They are using them inside an economy that constantly tells them to keep up, look successful, stay productive, build credit, invest in yourself, treat yourself, hustle harder, and never admit you are scared. That is the emotional engine of American debt. Shame. Shame makes people borrow quietly. Shame makes people hide the bill. Shame makes people think, everyone else is doing fine, I must be the problem. But everyone else is not doing fine. A lot of people are performing fine. There is a difference. And social media made this so much worse. Because now the American dream is not only the house and the car. It is the vacation photos, the nursery reveal, the kitchen renovation, the matching family pajamas, the wedding, the graduation shoot, the birthday party with balloon arches that look like a small business loan. Everything is content now, even stability. And when stability becomes something you perform, debt becomes the costume department. But the older I get and the longer I live outside America, the more I think the real American dream was never supposed to be endless consumption. It was supposed to be security, a decent home, a decent job, time with your family, health, education, a little savings, a future that feels bigger than the next bill. That is not greedy, that is human. But America turned security into a product. You want health security? Choose the right job. You want retirement security? Manage your portfolio. You want education security? Take the loan. You want housing security? Win the bidding war. You want transportation security? Sign here for 72 months. You want emergency security? Better have a credit score. And then when people struggle, we call it a personal finance problem. But maybe it is not only personal finance. Maybe it is national design. Because when millions of people are in the same kind of debt, year after year, across education, housing, healthcare, cars, and basic emergencies, that is not millions of separate moral failures. That is a business model. And this is where people sometimes misunderstand criticism of America. They think if you criticize the system, you hate the country. No, I criticize it because I know Americans deserve better than a life where every milestone comes with an interest rate. I know Americans work hard. Honestly, that is part of what makes it so painful. Americans work so hard. They answer emails after hours. They commute forever. They take short vacations. They go back to work too soon after having babies. They drive sick kids to urgent care while calculating copays. They start side hustles after full-time jobs. They learn to sound optimistic while drowning. And then they are told the problem is that they ordered coffee. Girl, please. The coffee is not why the household debt is $18.8 trillion. The coffee is just warm. The hard truth is that the American dream became debt because America kept raising the price of stability while keeping the mythology of individual success. So people kept reaching. That is the part that still feels very American to me. People kept reaching. They reached for college. They reached for homes. They reached for safe neighborhoods. They reached for reliable cars. They reached for medical care. They reached for a better life for their kids. And every time they reached, somebody handed them paperwork. Sign here, pay later. Interest starts accruing now. Living in Germany did not make me stop believing in the American dream. It made me realize the dream needs protection from the market. Because if every basic piece of a decent life has to be bought privately, financed individually, and defended alone, then the dream stops being a promise. It becomes a subscription. And once you see that, you cannot unsee it.